When you don't have a lot of space to work with and you want to include a packed bubble chart, one way to make it fit in a more compact area is to overlap the bubbles. I'll start by building the basic structure of a packed bubble chart. And the easiest way to create a packed bubble chart in Tableau is to double-click the field you want to use to segment the bubbles. In this case, that's the category field. Then you would do the same thing with the measure that you want to use. But since I'm using the count of order IDs, which is not currently a measure value, I'm going to bring the order ID into the columns. Then I'll right-click and convert it into a measure by using the count distinct. In the upper right corner, click Show Me, and then choose the packed bubble chart. To customize this a little bit, I'll start by copying the count of the order ID measure. Then I'll paste that again into the marks. Then I'll make this a label so you can see the actual count of order IDs for each category bubble. And I'm going to repeat that process, but this time I'm going to right-click, go to Quick Table Calculation, and choose the percent of total. Then I'll make this a label so we can see the percentage of order IDs that each category bubble represents out of the total. And then you can edit the colors using the legend to assign different colors to the different category bubbles. Then you can use color in the marks to decrease the opacity. To format an individual measure within our bubbles, I'm going to right-click Format on our percentage. I'll change the number format to a percentage with no decimals. And to format the text itself, I'll go to Label within the marks, edit it, and I'll move these around so they're in the correct order. Then I'll make the category bold, and I'll change the text of everything to Tableau regular. And this is showing everything in the dataset, so I'm going to pull order date into the filters and choose a relative date. And I'll filter for this year only. And that gives us a basic packed bubble chart. To take this bubble chart to the next level, I'll show how to allow the bubbles to overlap. So first I need to start by creating an X and Y axis so I can control where the bubbles are positioned. I'll create a calculated field for the X axis of the bubble chart. And I'm going to assign a horizontal position on the X axis for each category value. In this case, I have 3 category values. So I'm going to start with if the category equals technology, then -1.5. Else if the category equals furniture, then 2. Else if the category equals office supplies, then -0.75. And if you have more category values, then you would keep adding on. You can play around with the values depending on where you want the bubbles to be, but I found these positions to work well for 3 bubbles. I'll right-click on our X-axis field to duplicate it. And this will be for the Y-axis. We already have the structure in here, so I'm just going to go through and change the Y-axis values. Then I'll pull X into the columns, and I'll right-click to make it a dimension. I'll pull Y into the rows, and I'll right-click to make it a dimension. Then you can use the size slider in the marks to increase the size of the bubbles. And I'll drag the size of the axis in to get this to be a more similar size to what the visual will be on my dashboard. And to get the text within the bubbles, I'll use label within the marks and center this horizontally and vertically. To move the bubbles closer together, we could either edit all of the X and Y coordinate positions, or we can expand the range of the axis. So I'm going to right-click to edit the X-axis and give it a fixed custom range between -4 and 4. And I'll do the same thing for the Y-axis, giving it a custom fixed range between -4 and 4. Then I'll use the size slider to increase the size of the bubbles, and you can see they're now overlapping. But the text disappeared, so I need to use label within the marks and allow the labels to overlap. If I want to move the position of the bubbles themselves, like moving furniture to the left a little bit so they're more overlapping, I can edit the X-axis to move it left or right. To move the furniture bubble to the left, I'll decrease the value of the X position from 2 to 1.7. To move the position of a bubble up or down, I'll edit the y-axis. And I want to move the technology bubble up a little bit, so I'll increase the y position. If you don't want a Venn diagram effect, you can increase the opacity to 100%, so the overlapping bubbles no longer show the blended colors. And you may have noticed the percentages got messed up when we added our x and y coordinates. To adjust the percentages, right-click on the field, go to Compute Using, and choose Table. And now our percentages are back to being accurate. And the text doesn't seem vertically aligned to me, so I'll use Label within the marks to edit the text. A trick I like to do is add an extra line at the top, and then add a space. Then I'll make the size of the font for that space 2. That way we can control the spacing to get the text vertically centered within our bubbles. Using these overlapping bubbles in a packed bubble chart efficiently uses space. And it's fully customizable because we can move the bubbles anywhere we want on the plane.